Hi, I'm Danielle Hartman. Grab a beer and join me for another episode of Poured in PA, a series sharing the stories of Pennsylvania's craft beer industry. To start off this episode, we meet up with some gentlemen in Braddock, Pennsylvania. Brew Gentlemen was started by two college friends 7 years ago. Over those years, they've learned a lot and adapted their business model to meet the needs of the consumer. We check in to see what they're currently up to.
The history of Brew Gentlemen. Asa and I started the company while we were still in college, brewing in our college garage. We barely graduated, but we spent our entire senior year kind of working on the business plan, figuring out what we wanted to do, basically dropped everything while we were in college to start the company. We found Braddock for our location in an old electrical supply store that we're in right now that we renovated over the course of a year or so and opened our doors in May of 2014. Braddock was a really quiet town. There was now Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman was the mayor and was kind of campaigning for Braddock being this urban frontier. What some might see as buildings falling down and a town that got the rug pulled out from under it, we saw as an opportunity to help rebuild a community, especially in the 21st century of just, a lot of these towns across America. How do we keep the history and the bones of what existed and rebuild it and not leave the community behind in doing so? Very early on, we made the decision that we wanted to focus on soft and balanced beers, and I think a lot of that stemmed from just the beers we enjoy drinking. You hear brewers say this all the time. We make what we want to drink, but we really saw a need to have a nod to the classics. So we do a lot of the lagers and classic English styles, but also our portfolio is very heavily hop forward. We were very early to making kind of what has become known as the hazy or New England style IPA. Our flagship General Braddock's is kind of the epitome of our brewing philosophy, which is soft and balanced. When we opened in 2014, the taproom model was actually a really new thing. When we actually were getting our licenses, you had to get a brew pub license and a brewery license. It wasn't until the year after we had opened that you could just have a taproom. And so we kind of creatively got around a lot of laws early on, I would say, to be able to focus on the taproom model, which was direct to consumer in the taproom, having them come down, buy beer over the counter, fill growlers, have pints on site. Before that, you couldn't sell pints on site in the way that we did unless you were serving food. We were, again, very early to kind of the food truck model. I think we were the first brewery in Pittsburgh to have like a set schedule of food trucks. It's been really cool to see kind of the evolution of the entire model as new breweries have opened and people riff off of each other's ideas and kind of you grow this kind of new thing, which is the brewery tap room, and that's kind of become a staple that we see not only here in Pittsburgh and the state of Pennsylvania but nationally. The way that we kind of always wrote our business plan and our business model was to start with the taproom model as a proof of concept, and that really allowed us to get direct feedback from customers and be really close to it. We were still young. Asa and I raised money and started the company. We weren't even 21 when we wrote the original business plan, so we had to prove a lot early on, and we started small with the taproom. And once we kind of found out and figured out what it was that was going to resonate, we planned an expansion. We started on that probably mid-2017, early 2018, of really getting everything, foundationally laid out. We didn't announce everything because, in the brewing industry, you announce things and plans take longer than expected. So we were very quiet about our expansion plans. And even once we announced it, it still took a year from the time that we announced it. But we were planning on scaling up, creating a much larger manufacturing facility and doing that so that we could can General Braddock's. The reasoning behind focusing on General Braddock's and the expansion was it was voted in a blind taste test, one of the second best IPAs in the country, gotten a nod as one of the top 25 IPAs in the country. It's gotten a lot of nice praise, and I think that that's just a testament to our brewing staff and kind of our philosophy around beer. We saw that as kind of the next iteration in a line of modern IPAs. You look back and you see things like Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, and you see Dogfish Head 60 Minute, and you see Bell's Two Hearted, and then you saw like Heady Topper. We saw General Braddock's as kind of in a lineage lineage with a lot of those brands is something that we could take this profile that we really enjoyed and we saw the customer enjoy as well and scale that, which is difficult to do. And it's why a lot of the bigger breweries were kind of having a hard time with that early on with brewing hazy beers. But we saw, a beer that we loved and a beer that we saw that the consumer was enjoying and bringing that and making that readily available and making a beer that the customer could always come back to was important. Obviously, this past year was, the pandemic and coronavirus. We finished construction the week of the lockdowns in Pennsylvania. So for our new production facility, we slid under the door like Indiana Jones style in finishing that and started brewing. Crazy enough, our timeline for the expansion, we were still within a week or two of when we had planned on launching General Braddock. So in May, during our 6th anniversary, that was kind of the first time our beer was available in cans. And it started with General Braddock's, and now it includes almost our entire portfolio in smaller batches, but General Braddock's is now readily available, which has been the goal since we planned the expansion. So it's been great to kind of, even though we had everything happen, we were able to kind of stick to the timeline and stick to the script. Our company has always been a balance between retail and manufacturing. And I think the hard part is, the pandemic, what it really did was it ripped retail out from, all of the breweries in the state. And we had to kind of mentally refocus on the manufacturing, and not just because we had this new production facility, but because retail was gone. And how did we reinvent that? And it's weird. It's, the tap room is still closed. We haven't reopened it at all. I know a lot of breweries have tried to do outdoor spaces or do limited capacity. We've stuck to just doing beer available to go and really focused on kind of the manufacturing side and distribution, making General Braddock's available at beer distributors close to people's homes, making it available on draft at the places that are opening up. But yeah, for us, it's been a weird kind of rebalancing of our focus. So I think the interesting thing with the future of craft beer and even just the future of access to beer is something that we've thought a lot about. Distribution has always been part of the beverage industry, and there have been old models that have helped a lot of breweries grow. The last 20, 30 years, we've seen a lot of craft breweries, but a lot of the distributors have consolidated. And so, you're seeing each city maybe having one or two big distributors, maybe a couple other smaller craft ones. And a lot of these smaller breweries, especially ones that focus on the taproom model, are being locked out of distribution. They can't even get meetings with distributors. But I think the really interesting thing is something that we kind of have been talking about probably as early as like 2017, 2018, of kind of what does the world look like when you have infinite shelf space. And I think that direct-to-consumer shipping is going to be here to stay. I think the consumer wants it. One of my favorite nods from Jeff Bezos is, what's not going to change in 10 years? And the consumer's still going to want to drink amazing beer at an affordable price and have it be convenient. And, shipping is going to continue to be convenient. And as breweries kind of figure out how to get that beer to the consumer in those ways, I think we're going to see, I think it's going to be good for the business. I think we're going to see a lot of breweries access customers they might never have been able to before. And, you're not going to see these rare breweries or hyped breweries be gatekept by the people willing to drive, miles and miles and miles and miles. And now it becomes more accessible to the everyday consumer, which is a good thing because now more people can share in kind of these great beers. I would draw comparisons to the other industries in the world right now, and you're seeing a lot of direct-to-consumer being, a focus. And that's not to say that the retail model is gone. I think that you're going to see a balance between the two, right? And you still will have an in-person experience that will, allow new customers to be able to experience your brand. But then when they go home and they want to order more, they can easily do so online, especially places that don't have distribution throughout the state or in neighboring states or whatnot. Back in the day, it was easy to go visit Dogfish Head, for example. You could go to Rehoboth Beach and then you'd go home and Dogfish Head would be on the shelf and you could get beer as the memory. I think, I grew up in Kona, and Kona Brewing was, before it was acquired, it was that for a lot of people. They went to Hawaii and they got to drink craft beer in Hawaii, and then when they went home, they tried to find it on shelves because it reminded them of that. I think we're going to see that, except people are going to be able to get directly from the brewery, which is awesome. One of the things that we've seen too with this shift is the difference between hype and demand, and scarcity is a business model, and a lot of breweries play into that. And not that that's a bad thing or anything, but now we're starting to see what true demand is for these products, and customers are able to make a decision that isn't based on, you know, the line, like, oh, it must be good because there's a line. Rather, you know, it's a lot more beer is able to stand on its own two legs of like the credibility of it is a good product. There will always be this element of you know, desire of getting things you can't have, and there's nothing wrong with any of this. It's just, I think we're starting to see kind of what true demand looks like. And you know, the problem that we're trying to solve, and I think the interesting one, is how do you balance supply and demand? How do you have enough fresh beer in the market at the right times, for the right people, especially with the type of beers we're doing? Freshness is gonna be, that has to be one of the biggest things we focus on, and to balance that supply and demand in the market is a new challenge. In terms of kind of our portfolio in the distribution model, I think we've always wanted General Braddock's to be the leader. So leading with that, it's a great opener. I mean, it's a great way to get a foot in the door at a lot of places. It's our flagship. And I think the flagship model, while it might have gotten lost over the last 6 or so years with kind of the rotation and like the newness, I think there's still room for breweries to have a flagship product, but we also will eventually be putting out other brands. I mean, we have an entire portfolio of beers. For us, it's like, which one do we choose? Because there's so many strong players that could contribute to our presence in distributors and at grocery stores and at, you know, bars and restaurants. We've got a couple in the pipeline. We'll always have General Braddock's, but it'll be what else is there with.
The Philadelphia Grain and Malt Symposium is an annual educational networking event that brings together farmers, maltsters, bakers, brewers, and consumers. This year, the event was held online, but that didn't stop a great collaboration from taking place. Deer Creek Malthouse and Tröegs teamed up for a pretty unique brew.
This collaboration came about through trying to figure out how we can come together as a community and use a product made with grain from the region and have that be a way that we can tell the story of grain and malt, especially in the context of an annual convening event that happens in Philly, the Philly Grain and Malt Symposium. So this is a really nice way for people to come together, make a beer that has a lot of meaning using local ingredients, and try and tell that story. The Grain and Malt Symposium, this is our 6th year now, and it really arose out of a need for the community to come together and talk about opportunities and challenges and how we can build a stronger value chain for everyone that uses grain and malt in the Mid-Atlantic. So that really is the goal of the event, is to try and bring people together to educate and then share products made with grain and malt.
Right now, we're starting off with Tröegs one. It's Scratch Series 430, which is a label out to the camera, very nice. Which is a spelt golden lager, which I just took my very first sip of, and it is absolutely incredible. And it's brewed in Pennsylvania grown and malted spelt, and 80 spelt baguettes from the high street on market. I really enjoy this.
It's very good. Can't go wrong with a Tröeg scratch beer. Any Tröeg beer, really.
That's true.
So I know
a lot of the grains that are characterized as ancient have origins that date back to the Fertile Crescent. So ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, long time ago. And some of those varieties aren't grown anymore. A lot of them were actually outcompeted by modern varieties of other types of grains. Spelt, for example, is actually an ancient variety of wheat, and it was outcompeted by modern wheat varieties because it has a hull, because it was harder to process and incorporate in a commoditized, more industrialized agricultural supply chain. Spelt is a really delicate and beautiful grain. It grows pretty well in Pennsylvania, and it contributes a lot of interesting characteristics to food and beverages. The spelt that was selected for this beer was chosen because it grows in Pennsylvania. The beer has actually a combination of spelt malt using grain that was grown in PA, and some spelt that was actually baked into bread that made its way into the beer. So I think the spelt contributes some body, certainly some traditional kind of bready characteristics, and some of that dry, nutty character that we've found is pretty distinct with spelt and beer.
At least for us, we're super into understanding why and how things taste the way they do. So from a beer geek standpoint, like we're constantly tinkering to find out why an ingredient does what it does when we start to brew with it. So in this case for the collaboration, we were talking to bakers and hearing them talk about all these breads they've made really sparked some interest in how that could be incorporated in the beer. They sent us in breads, we ate them, simple as that, and we're inspired by one of the breads in particular had a really nice crust that had a kind of a graham cracker flavor, and then on the inside almost had a slight honey sweetness to it, but it was super delicate and clean. We're like, wow, this is really great. Like I could definitely picture this with slabs of butter dipped in salt with a crisp golden lager next to it. So we're like, that's what we should aim at. We should try to figure out how to get that flavor of that bread into the beer.
Once the team at Tröegs tasted a couple of the different bread samples that were made using the spelt, they really gravitated towards some baguettes that were baked by High Street in Philadelphia.
Beer flavor can come from so many different things, and ultimately it starts with water, believe it or not. The water is the biggest ingredient in the beer, so it's not necessarily itself a major component, but it does influence how the other ingredients will taste. And then from water you move to grains, and grains can have a huge range of effect flavor-wise, texture-wise, and color. That's also where the more grain you add, the more fermentable sugar you should have. Meaning more alcohol ultimately you have. So that's where you start to talk about fermentation. Fermentation can bring in all sorts of different flavors too, depending on which yeast strains you use. You can be real mild and clean in flavor, or you can get real funky and spicy and like black pepper and banana, and there's all sorts of different combinations you can bring in from fermentation. After we talk about all that, then we get to hops. Hops can be and are a huge component flavor-wise, but they don't have to be a large part of it. So hops get pretty aggressive quickly, so you have to be really careful on how you use them. It's just like when you cook, like you don't want to use too much salt. Salt enhances flavors of what you taste, and if you use too much salt, it doesn't taste so great. So hops are the exact same way. So it's really more about the combination of flavor coupled with the technique, comes up with your final beer in our case.
Bread and beer have a lot of similarities. They date back thousands of years, and they both were ways that early civilizations were able to unlock a lot of the nutrition in cereal crops. Although it's not clear what came first, I think there is evidence that bread was used to actually brew in a lot of early civilizations. So bread was baked with coarsely ground barley or emmer or spelt, these ancient varieties of wheat. That bread was then incorporated into the mash, filtered, and then fermented. Probably not a lot of enzyme activity, a lot of spontaneous fermentation at that time, but the concept of using bread to make beer has been around for a long time, and some of those elements are actually included into this recipe.
I'm not 100% sure, can't remember exactly who recommended it, but someone said, well, why don't we put bread in it somehow? We're like, well, geez, I've never done that before. Like, what does that even mean? So ultimately what we came up with is it was about 80 pounds of bread that we cut up and put into the mash portion of brewing. And that's where the grains are mixed with hot water, and you kind of cook it over time to change the starches into sugar. So that's where we added the bread in. So we were able to incorporate the flavors of the bread actually into the beer ultimately. And at the same time, using the bread as kind of the guidelines, we built the beer's malt recipe around not overpowering that bread, which ultimately it was about the spelt. So how do we bring the flavor of spelt, that slight nuttiness, a little bit of the honey that comes through, and the floral nature of spelt all the way through to beer? We combined the ingredient of spelt with actual bread baked with spelt, and brewed a golden lager.
I think this beer is a really perfect example of why I do what I do. We make malt, and to do that, we have to work with a lot of different people, and our goal is really try and shorten the value chain, bring consumers closer to the farm and the farmers who grow grain, and teach people that beer is an agricultural product. It's not a commodity, and try and make a meaningful beverage that has a story and build community and all of those things this project did.
Thanks for joining me for another episode. Don't go just yet. We have a brewery spotlight that takes us to Coatesville. Check out Animated Brewing Company. Until next time. Cheers.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Steve and I, we know each other. We met music scene,
Yeah.
like over 20 years ago at this point.
At least.
I guess we were teenagers.
Yeah.
Westchester had a nice music scene back in the day, so always going to shows and mutual friends of friends being in bands. And
we were in a band real briefly together. I left early on, and
Yeah.
he continued on, and
you played 3 or 4 shows.
yeah. And then he made it to Germany in the band, and
Yeah.
I did not. We've been homebrewing together for well over 10 years now. He got a homebrew system for a gift or something like that, and started doing one stovetop style. Learned a lot in that very first one.
It was like a 1 gallon batch.
Yeah.
And
Awful.
it was horrible. And it took,
So bad.
took like 9-10 hours to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've come a long way.
In that first one, we learned it was cleaning was everything.
Yeah.
Even on a small scale like that, you're going to be cleaning nonstop. I got to put this on silent.
Steve sent me a random text message one day. He's like, "Hey, do you want to start a brewery?" And I was like, I just responded. I was like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?"
One of those like days that everybody has at your job where you're just like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore.
You gotta
It's
get
like,
out.
Let's do a brewery.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a random text, and I said, "Sure, let's do it." And
Yeah.
you know, we started taking baby steps, and eventually we have a brewery.
Yeah. First, we started talking to a friend of ours who is one of our investors, and just shot the idea around with him. And he was like real excited about it. And that kind of like got us more excited about it, thinking like this could actually be a thing. You know, and back then we were talking about like, you know, how most people try to start out. We were like, well, let's aim to do a 1 barrel system. Let's rent a garage, like a tiny garage. Let's see if we can do that. We never went down that road, but that's kind of how we were starting to build our business plan for.
And then you start reading more and more into that.
About how
and
that's not going to work.
not totally doable.
Yeah.
So then we started planning on, hey, let's just, you know, what's the biggest that we can afford with our fundraising. And yeah, we're on 7 barrel now, and very happy we went that route.
Absolutely. Yeah. Most people that we talked to, they were like, that's kind of the threshold where you're not going to be killing yourself, and you'll be able to support a tap room. And it's kind of like the magic number is that 7 barrel mark. And it's like, if you can start there, you can make it work.
You know, as far as choosing this area, craft beer has kind of ignored Coatesville and this whole area. And we're like, well, I know that area, you know, this is where I grew up. I know it really well. And there's a ton of people here that love beer.
Yeah.
So let's go in there and be the first ones and try to get it moving for the city. And It's really starting to come around, and the local support from everyone has just been amazing.
Yeah, everybody's been vying for something like this to spark business development in Coatesville.
I mean, we looked for a spot. Like 2 to 3 years it took us to find a spot.
We're looking
that
at
was
Philadelphia,
right.
Delaware County, Montgomery County, Chester County. We were really looking in Chester County just because friends and family are still out here. We got friends throughout Philadelphia, but it's tough to find a spot, and it's tough to make something work down there. So we knew if we could find a spot close to friends and family out here, at least you kind of have that like built-in, support system. Yeah, which is kind of what we were aiming for.
Huge.
Especially we opened up a week after the shutdown happened. So, I mean, if it wasn't for that, like I don't know how we would have done it.
We opened during the pandemic. Our planned grand opening was for the week after it all shut down. Yeah. And at that point, we were
beer in the tanks,
ready to go, taps ready to go, and we're like, oh my God, what do we do? Yeah. It was overnight. Yeah.
Yeah. That beginning shutdown, you weren't even allowed to have outdoor seating. So it was even before they let any of that stuff slide. So everybody was just kind of scrambling to, fill cans. And we didn't have any kind of like deal with Ironheart, who we use now for canning. We had a crowler machine, and it saved us.
But only a handful of crowlers.
Right.
Yeah. It was crazy. Overnight, everything shifted to cans.
Yeah.
And we were not, we didn't see it. We didn't see it coming. And we were like blindsided by it. And I mean, luckily, we're good friends with East Branch Brewing in Downtown and the Bottle Room in Downtown. And they had some extra cans and crowlers, and they're like, here, take these, like get going. Like
it's huge.
Yeah, sell those cans out right out your garage door. And
even growlers, we ran out of growlers, and we were packaging some beer to go in Bottle Room label growlers.
Yeah, but it was literally overnight. Our business plan was in the trash.
Yeah,
we were like, okay, let's figure out how to sell beer to go. Because our whole plan is selling pints for on-site consumption, and man, it wasn't doable, and we were scrambling.
So that changed everything. We have a kitchen that's open now, and we weren't planning on opening the kitchen until this spring. Mm-hmm. We opened that up in November.
It forced us to
do everything,
accelerate our plan by probably 6 to 8 months before we were like even ready to. And we're only a 2-man operation, so we're doing everything. Like
we're going to be the ones delivering the beer to your door. We're going to be the ones bringing the beer to the distributor, and we're going to be the ones serving your plate of food here.
It's like we have no other choice.
Yeah,
exactly. We literally have to do it all ourselves for now.
Yeah.
Until once things open up full again.
I mean, we say that, but want to fully acknowledge that we have a phenomenal staff of bartenders and our chef. We couldn't do anything without our chef here.
Chef Mike is half the company. He's one-man show back there too.
So when we say like 2-man operation, we're talking about the brewery end of things. Yeah. But the whole thing here is a well-oiled machine of excellent bartenders and our chef that's just making the best food. So we don't want to forget that.
No, can't stress that enough. Yeah. Chef is number one.
Yeah, we're just talking about the brewery side.
Yeah.
We definitely gravitate towards IPAs just because that was like probably both of our like introduction years and years ago into craft beer was the West Coast style IPA, the American IPA. So we definitely gravitate towards that style. But we love lagers, all styles like pilsners,
and a nice Kolsch.
Yeah, dark beers, porters, stouts. We enjoy all of them. But right now in the tanks we have a farmhouse, a double chocolate stout, a Helles lager, and a grapefruit New England IPA. So 4 vastly different beers in the tanks right now.
We try to keep a nice variety on the tap list when we can.
Yeah.
It has leaned heavily IPA recently.
Yeah.
Just because of the shutdown, we had to
Can everything.
can everything.
And then when you start talking to distributors, as interested as they can be in some other styles, they're really more interested in getting some New England IPAs off of you, hazy IPAs, any IPA really, but you know, they're like, that's great, you have chocolate vanilla porter. When's your next IPA coming out?
We kind of want to try to be known for as having a nice variety. We don't want to just, be pigeonholed into, hey, we make fruited sour IPAs.
Right.
Just don't want to do that. We want to come. We want someone to come in here and find something that they're gonna like. We want this to feel like, if you walk in the door, it's all friends. You're hanging out with friends. Even if you don't know the guy sitting at the table next to you, you can still spark up a conversation.
Yeah.
And it happens. People just come in and everyone's having a good time and just talking. And that camaraderie. We want that when you walk in that door.
People be very comfortable. Like you can find your own little nook, settle in and drink a few beers.
I think the way people can help breweries right now is just give everyone a try. Just get out there and buy beer, whether it's at a distributor or you go to the brewery itself, just buy beer. Even if you don't think you can drink it all right away, just hoard it.
That's perfect.
Just buy it.
Yes, definitely.
You'll get around to drinking it eventually. So just stock up.
Yeah.